Hey YouTube, kind of feel like doing an Xbox One controller review / history. Okay, now you can come by me. This is the Xbox One controller. Overall, it's pretty good. If you're familiar with the Xbox 360 controller, the layout is exactly the same. You have two analog sticks, D-pad, A and B, X and Y face buttons, two bumpers, two analog triggers, your Xbox or menu button. This is where start used to be. It's now called the menu button, and I forget what this button is called, but it's where the select would be. What should I talk about?
Maybe you should talk about some of your boxes and some of your other controllers.
No. About the controller first.
Yeah, there's a pretty good light up symbol right there.
Yeah, this will light up white when you
Yep.
when it's on, and then this is the sync button. If you're familiar with the Xbox 360 button, you would have a battery pack right here. They redesigned it to be flat.
Nope.
I have a rechargeable battery pack in here, otherwise it takes AA's. And then you can hook in your headset or other accessory there. And it has a micro USB port right here. I compare that to the 360 controller. You'll notice that the analog sticks are a bit smaller, and to me they feel looser. The 360 has a bit more resistance.
I'm staying right where I am.
But yeah, if you like the 360 controller, this is pretty much the same. I would say that it's slightly less comfortable, but it's still superior to the PlayStation setup. Even though the PlayStation 4 controller is better than it used to be, is better than PS3 and all the previous PlayStation controllers, but it still has the analog sticks in the wrong place where your thumbs can hit each other and it's just not comfortable. When you put your hands on the Xbox controller, the action buttons, and the main analog stick are right where they should be. And when you need to move the camera, which is mainly what you use the other analog stick for, there it is. For switch, going back and forth is quite easy. Another good thing about the Xbox One controller over the PS4 controller, which I don't have to show you anymore because I sold my PS4. The PS4 controller has a built-in battery. The problem with that, which a lot of people think that's the greatest thing in the world, but the problem with that is that one, it's not replaceable. So down the road in the future, those batteries are going to be dead. There's not going to be any controllers that work. With the Xbox One, you can just put in new batteries. Or, if you like that rechargeable aspect, you can just get a charge and play kit. Which comes in a box that looks like so. The charge and play kit also comes with a micro USB cord. So you have yet another option to power your controller, which is typically what I do. This controller is on right now, hooked up with micro USB. It is a true wired controller. There is nothing in there. You never have to worry about a charge at all. Just play an old-fashioned wired controller. Yes, the PS4 does have a USB port as well, but it's only used for charging. It is not used to convey data to the game console, as far as I understand. If I'm wrong, go ahead and correct me in the comments. Now, one thing I want to talk about is kind of the history or the lineage of the Xbox controller. This controller, you could say, is the Xbox's great-grandpa. This was the first controller that had that basic layout. You have the analog up top, a digital pad below that, your face buttons on the right. Saturn has 6 buttons, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, start, and this controller also introduced analog triggers, which is now standard for all modern controllers. This is in my opinion, the very first modern game controller. This little switch down here, you have an X and an O. X meaning for digital control for games that were out before this controller was, or an O for analog for games that supported it. Then after Sega Saturn came Dreamcast, which you'll notice this controller here has basically the same design. A lot of people really compare this to an Xbox controller because it looks so similar to most people's minds. You have analog triggers, analog stick up top, digital down below, and instead of 6 face buttons, you've now been reduced to the diamond shape 4-button layout, which is now the standard in gaming today. A and B, X and Y, also colored, just like Xbox. Although the colors are in different places. Here the X is yellow, where on Xbox it's white. But it's the same colors. You have red and green and blue and yellow.
I'm sorry if you can't see the Xbox symbol on it, but there is. All you can see is light on this camera.
Oh, you can't see that?
Yeah, you can't see the symbol. You only can see it, the light.
Then we move to the original Xbox, which came out with this controller initially.
It's pretty huge. If you're an adult, you would probably recommend this instead of a kid.
The kids would probably have a tough time with this controller. And a lot of people hated this controller.
Yeah, because of the buttons.
Mainly because it's so fat. It is just gigantically fat.
Oh.
But yeah, you'll see the same layout again, basically. You have analog triggers.
Oop.
The sticks and D-pad are in the same place. And you could actually, it's sort of a 6-button layout if you count the black and white, but it's super vertical, which is annoying. And one thing I hate about this controller is these buttons are just really squishy. But yeah, and it also retained the ports up top, just like the Dreamcast controller. Then Microsoft wisened up and switched over to this controller, which is known as the S controller, or Slim.
It's the modified Xbox controller. It's just Xbox. It's the first one.
Yeah, and this one is much more comfortable.
Yeah, it's smaller.
But it still has, basically the black and white buttons have been moved down here. It's now in the 4-button pattern, and your start and back button are over here, which is slightly annoying. And this D-pad is far better than the one that's on the Duke, which is what this is known as, if I didn't mention that already.
I didn't see it. I didn't catch it on film.
The Duke and the S.
Zoom in. I haven't to zoom out. There.
And here is the good old Xbox 360 controller, which most of you are very familiar with. The Xbox 360 has had a very long life, coming out in November of 2005, and its successor did not appear all the way until November of 2013. Like I said, they're very similar. This is the wired controller, which is also flat in the back. Your wireless, this one's just black, has a battery pack that kind of sticks out. Some people think that's a big deal. Not really when your hands are on there. It's not really in the way. I do think the 360 controller is still slightly better than the Xbox One as far as comfort goes. The buttons feel a little bit better. They're pretty good still on Xbox One.
Something happened with the TV.
Yeah, it's hooked in, so.
Yeah, don't forget about this Wii controller over here. Those two Wiis.
I'll get to them.
Yep.
One thing that's better about the 360 controller, in my opinion, is these bumpers have a nice click to them, a little bit more give, whereas the ones on the One don't move much. They do click. They're okay. They work. The analog, I like how the analogs on the 360 have more resistance, and they don't dig into your thumbs quite as much as the ones do, although the one does have a nice texture pattern around the analog stick. The D-pad is the cross-sectional, which I don't know why we ever left the rolling D-pad that Sega had. That is the best D-pad in the history of gaming, period. But anyways, that's off topic. This D-pad is better than the one on the 360. Not the best D-pad in the world, but it's alright. But yeah. So, in a nutshell, the Xbox One controller is not as great as its predecessor. PS4's controller is better than its predecessor, but the Xbox One controller still beats out the PS4 controller, in my opinion. Mainly, and one of the biggest reasons is because it actually holds a charge for more than a day. I do want to talk about Nintendo a little bit.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun.
As you can see, there's the title. I zoomed in too much, and you took it.
Oh, you're zooming into the GameCube?
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up with the controller's analog stick situation, and what I really hate about Sony is putting the analogs down here.
Yep, and Nintendo copied them.
Sony's the only one who does that, really. Even Nintendo is smart enough to realize the analog belongs in the primary position. In my opinion, the GameCube controller is Nintendo's best controller that they've ever designed. It's quite comfortable. You have the analog stick up here. You have what's known as the C button, but it's basically a second analog stick down here. A little tiny D-pad right here. One thing I don't like about that